I'll be so glad when the sun goes down.
When the sun goes down.
I'll be so glad when the sun goes down.
When the sun goes down.
I ain't all that sleepy, but I wanna lie down.
But I wanna lie down.
I ain't all that sleepy, but I wanna lie down.
But I wanna lie down.
I wanna lie down, baby.
Good morning. Thanks for tuning to Apprentice Live. My name is Anaya.
And my name is Shamir, and today we'll be talking about the Great Migration. But before we get into that, let's see what the community knows about it.
It's been a long time coming, but I know.
My name is Brandon Miller.
Jerry Tobias.
Johnny Thurman.
Rashawn Williams.
Saeed Muhammad.
It's when people move north to do better.
Is the massive amounts of people that move from the south to the north after or before the Civil War, or both, or during, or in response to.
I was leaving the South to fling myself into the unknown. I was taking a part of the South to transplant an alien soil, to see if it could grow differently, if it could drink of new and cool rains, bend in strange winds, respond to warmth of other suns, and perhaps to bloom. By Richard Wright.
In the 1900s, most of the African American population lived in southern states. In the 1910s and 20s, a large amount of the African American population moved from the south to other parts of the United States. In fact, 90% of the African American population still lived in southern states. However, many began to move into northern and midwestern states such as New York and Pennsylvania. The reasons they were moving varied from family to family. In some cases, people were moving to find jobs at the steel mill, the automobile factory, the meatpacking plant, and the railroad. Some were looking for better education for their children. Some were trying to escape the racism and violence that African Americans were experiencing in the South. Most who left the South headed for northern larger cities like Chicago, New York, Detroit, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland. All of these cities experienced significant surges in population. For example, in 1910, the Detroit African American population was 6,000, but in 1930, it shot up to 120,000. Nationwide, only an estimated 740,000 African Americans lived outside the South in the 1900s. Over the course of the century, this number rose to around 10 million living in other regions of the country. This makes the Great Migration one of the largest and fastest movements of people to one part of a nation to another. As black populations rose, northern cities became increasingly integrated. This means many African American people were working alongside recent European immigrants and other white residents. These cities also became centers for African American culture. Newspapers, churches, businesses, and political organizations were established to redefine black culture. There were also some negative impacts of the Great Migration. Many African Americans who moved north did experience racism in their new cities. In some neighborhoods, white people moved away, trying to avoid all contact with African Americans.
This resulted in some places such as Harlem having an almost exclusively all-black population. Obviously, another significant impact of the Great Migration were the changing demographics of the South. Every southern state experienced a loss in the African American population. African Americans made up more than 50% of the population in both Mississippi and South Carolina. Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, and Georgia had populations that were more than 40% within just a few decades. These numbers would be reduced to less than 30% in nearly every one of these states.
I go to the movie and I go downtown. Somebody keep telling me don't hang around. It's been a long time coming, but I I know